Good morning.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning. We're going to start today's Daf Yomi, which is on the top of 7a. So we have been discussing in yesterday's Daf, we discussed that if there's an animal called an ishus, which is an animal which has it's blind and it also is destructive to the fields that you're growing your crops in, that you're allowed to destroy it, to trap the animal in the normal manner if it's in a field of trees, b'stei ha'ilon, and if it's in a grain field in an unusual manner, because it could do so much more damage in a field of trees. And so therefore you could catch it in the normal manner because it causes a lot of loss on Chol Moed. You're allowed to capture it in the normal manner. So Rabbi Yehuda says the top line of our Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mistei Ayilan Kedarko, Mistei Alavan Shal Kedarko. We said in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says you could catch this animal in the normal manner in a field of trees, in an unusual manner in a field of grain. Tana Rabbanan Keitza Kedarko. So the rabbis told, what does it mean that you could catch it in the normal manner? How do you catch an ishus, this ishus animal? So we answer chofer guma, that you could dig a hole in the ground. We told Mitsuda, you suspend a trap there. That's how you capture it in a normal manner. Keitza Chalokadarko. How do you catch an animal in an unusual manner? What's the unusual way, which is the only way you're allowed to do it according to Rabbi Yehuda in the grain field? No, it's shpud. You take a stick, and you smack it with a hammer or an axe, and basically you shake the ground mitaftel. You shake the ground. Either you scare it out, or else if you don't scare it out, what you do is you destroy you basically crush the hole, and thereby the animal gets either destroyed or has to run away. Tanya, we learned in a Brayso, so there's a lot of different versions about who taught it, either Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, maybe Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, or maybe Rabbi Gamliel, different versions. He taught Kisha'amru Mistei Lavan Shelo Kedarko, that which we taught that if it's in a grain field, you can capture it in an unusual manner. Well, or I want to say at the beginning, actually, all of our learning today is sponsored by Tzvi Gamnitsky in honor of Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker. Thank you, Tzvi, and we are proud to study in that rabbi's honor. So, when they said that you capture in a grain field in an unusual manner, they only say this in a grain field that's next to the city, because let's say you don't catch the ishus animal, what's the worst it's going to do? It's going to get into the streets of the city. It's not going to do so much damage. But if it's an orchard, if it's a grain field that's next to an orchard of trees, then a field kedarko, then you can even capture it in the normal manner, because then we're concerned. Then we're concerned it's going to get out from the grain field and destroy the trees, and that'll be a big problem, obviously. So if you have a mole in your grain field, if it's next to a tree field, then capture it. Don't mess around. And then we said Makaranus appearance of a Moed. We said in our Mishnah that you're allowed to repair a breach in a fence on Chol Moed. So what does this mean? Kates and Makaran, how do you repair the breach in this fence? Rav Yosef says, Behutz of a Dafn. He says, okay, look, you could repair the breach, but just do it with hoots of a dafna in an ad hoc manner. Hoots of a dafna is like palm branches or leaves. You're not using it, and it's not a real fence. If you hired somebody to build you a fence and he built you a fence out of palm branches, you'd want your money back. So it's an ad hoc manner just to protect you temporarily. Whereas b'masnisa tana, we learned in a brayso, tsar v'tzror ve'eno tach batit. No, you can put up stones, but you can't use the cement on them. Again, the same idea. Since it's chol moed, you have to just do it in an unusual manner. Rav Chisda taught Roshanu Elakosel Agina, that which we taught that you could only do it in an ad hoc manner and to fix the fence, that is only if it's a Kosel Agina, if it's a wall of a garden. So they used to have in those days, presumably the way they built their architecture was they had a courtyard which led into the home. And hold on, somebody's trying to come in out there, Rowie. Can you check? Somebody's outside. I thought I saw somebody outside, Rowie. So they had a. Okay, so we say that they used to have their architecture, and in their architecture they had these gardens in the back, but they had the walls and they had the courtyard in the front, and the courtyard went into the house. So that which we said goes so agina, that which we said that you could only do it in an ad hoc manner. That was the garden in the back of al koso achotzer, but the wall for the courtyard, which would go right into your home, and they could have a carte blanche because they're going to steal all your money if you don't have a wall up around your courtyard. Well, under those circumstances, Rav Chisda is telling us, Bona Kedarko. He says, under those circumstances, you can build a tree, you can build a wall however you want, because otherwise the people are going to break in. So the Gemara says, Lema Messiah, let's find the support for Rav Chisda from the following source, because it says, Koso Agocha, or Shusaravim, let's say you have a wall that's leaning into the public domain and it's leaning, then so Sarabona Kadarko, then you can break down the wall, you destroy the wall and build it in the normal manner. So there it says because of the danger, you're allowed to destroy the wall and rebuild it properly. So and this is obviously talking about Chol Moed. So we see from here that if it is a wall from your courtyard, because it's going into the public domain and the courtyard led into the public domain, you could build the wall regularly. So this is a support for Rav Chisda. So the Gemara says, no, that case is obviously different. There, the reason why you're allowed to build it regularly is because sakana. We're worried it's going to cause a lot of damage to the people in the street. It's going to hurt them. So that's why for sure you're allowed to do it in the regular manner. Because otherwise you could hurt somebody. And in fact, some people took the same source and the there are others, they brought the source not as a proof for Rav Chisda or as a putative proof, but as actually a question against Rav Chisda. The da Amrila, and some say that this was actually a question against Rav Chisda. How is it a question against Rav Chisda? Because we say, Tashma, we learned Kosa Agocha or Shusaravim, the Brisa taught a wall that fell into the public domain. Or it was leaning into the public domain. You're allowed to destroy it and rebuild it because otherwise it'll be dangerous. But it shows you could rebuild it properly, but only because there's a danger. Only because it's dangerous. But if it's not a time of danger, well, you can't build it. Even the wall of a courtyard, if it doesn't represent the danger, you can't rebuild it. So you have to do Rav Chisda. So maybe this must be a refutation against Rav Chisda, because Rav Chisda said, wall of a courtyard you could always rebuild. So the Gemara, and here from this case, it's limited to the case of a danger. So the Gemara says, no. Rav Chisda says, Hasam Sosa Rabona. There, the reason why we're saying it because of danger is because you're even allowed to tear it down because of a danger. Hacha here, where I'm saying that you can tear it even where it's not a danger and you can build it up regularly, that's bone evelo soser. Here, where I'm saying it is a case where you could build it and not tear it down because it's only building it. So there, you don't need it to be a danger. You could just build it without it being a danger, and you can build it the regular manner by a courtyard. So Gemara says, well, in that case also, hasam nami listor. So if the case is different there, if it was just a concern of the danger, it could have just said tear it down below with me. It doesn't have to say to rebuild it. The fact that it's saying rebuild it because of a danger means if you leave it there, it'll be dangerous. If you leave it there unbuilt. Gemara says, no, that's not the case. If we're gonna, it's a danger. The wall could fall. And if we're gonna say take it down, but you can't rebuild it, a lot of people will say, listen, I don't care. I'll get the ticket from the city. I don't care about the danger. And then meanwhile, God forbid, somebody could walk by and get hurt. So therefore, if the person's going to be told you're not going to be able to rebuild it, you know what he's going to do? He's not going to take it down until he's going to be able to rebuild it. And so that's going to be a big problem. So that's the psychology. So since the psychology of somebody is if he can't rebuild it, he's not going to take it down. Therefore, we say that you're supposed to take it down. You could take it down and rebuild it because of the danger. Even during Chamo, you could rebuild it because otherwise you wouldn't take it down in the first place. So the Gemara says, Amar Vashi Masnisin Nami Deka. We could even infer this from our Mishnah, this teaching of Rav Chisda, that you could rebuild the wall in your courtyard in a normal manner on Chol Moed and in your garden only in an ad hoc manner. We learned that from our Mishnah. We could infer because it says in our Mishnah, Ubashvias Bona Kedarko. It says in the sabbatical year, you could rebuild your fence that fell in the normal manner, meaning the proper way. Now, where was our Mishnah referring to this fence of the sabbatical year? If it was a fence of a courtyard, you wouldn't need to tell us. Of course, you could build a fence in your courtyard. There's no reason why you couldn't in the sabbatical year. It must be that it's a fence of your garden. And even though it looks like you're guarding your fruit, we're still going to allow you to do it. So our Mishnah, which says that you can rebuild your fence in the normal manner in the sabbatical year, is talking about a garden. But that must mean that when it says in the regular year, Moed, it's when you do it in an irregular manner, that's in your garden too. So on Moed, you could do your courtyard in a regular manner. Do you have a question? Okay, fine. So now we're up to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah is slightly complicated because we're not familiar with these laws. Next Mishnah refers to the laws of a mitzora. We know a person who has a nega, an affliction on their body, a skin ailment. The rabbi said that the Torah says that there's a certain type of skin condition which you will be required to go to the Kohen, and the Kohen would tell you whether or not you have a disease called saras, a spiritual disease called saras. So there are a few things that could happen when you go to the Kohen. You could either be told, the Kohen could tell you you're tahor, then there's nothing wrong with you. You could say, you know what it is. So you go to dermatologist says this is nothing, sends you home. And the Kohen could say this is nothing, he sent you home. That's called tahor. That's the first thing. The second thing the Kohen could say you have tzaras. If you have tzaras, you're what's called a muchat. You're a certain tzaras, and you're separated from the community until such time as the tzaras goes away. And then at that point, the Kohen does a purification process on you. You have to take 2 birds, send away the living bird. You slaughter one of the birds, and you sprinkle some of the blood and spring water on you. And then you count 7 clean days. You shave off all the hair from your body, and you bring a korban. So that is, or 7 days, not clean days. That is called the mitzvah muchat. There's 2 other possibilities, or one other possibility. It's called the mitzvah muskar. Muskar is you go to the Kohen. Kohen's not sure. He's not sure. You know, your test came back inconclusive. It's the worst of all. Then you have the most time. You go into what's called mitzvah muskar. You get put into confinement for a week. During that confinement, you have certain laws of the mitzvah, but not all the laws. So you're not allowed to be with them. You have to be in confinement. And after that 1 week, you go back to the Kohen. And if you're still unclear, you get separated for a second week. After the second week, the Kohen's going to have to make a decision, either tahor or tameh. But that's called the mitzvah muskar. So now we go to our Mishnah. Our mayor says, roanas and a gayim. So let's say you see this tzaras, you see this affliction, and you want to know if it's a tzaras or not. And it's Chol Moed. Rameir says you can look at these afflictions lahakel. If the Kohen could tell you, you don't have it. But if the Kohen thinks you have it, keep his mouth shut, don't say anything. Chachamim say no. Just don't go to him, because the Kohen, once you go to him, he's going to have to give a ruling. And so if the Kohen will see that you're tamei, he can't just keep his mouth shut. Then he knows too much. Then he's going to have to say something. So don't go to him at all. Gemara's going to have to say what this case is talking about. So Gemara says, Tanya, Rabbi Meir Omer. The Bride says, Rabbi Meir says, Roanas and Negayim Wahakel of Alola Hachmir. We look at the Negayim to be lenient, or not to be strict. That's Rabbi Meir's position. Whereas Rabbi Yossi, our Mishnah said his position was the Chachamim. Here we attribute it to Rabbi Yossi. Says, Lola Hakel, Lola Hachmir. You don't look at it at all, not to be lenient or strict. Why? Because if you're looking at it to be lenient, then all of a sudden you're going to have to give an opinion whether or not to be strict as well. So they say you have to give a ruling either way. So Amar Rabbi says this phrase, which we'll come back to in a few moments, but Rabbi says, Nir divrei Rabbi Meir b'muskar, v'divrei Rabbi Yossi b'muchad. He said, I agree with Rabbi Meir in a case of a muskar. In a case where we're not sure if he's a tamei or not. Then I agree with Rabbi Meir that he can look at it to be lenient. But in a case where it's a muchat, where we already know that he's a tamei, then I agree with Rabbi Yossi that you don't look at it. You don't look at it at all. So Gemara is going to go into this deeper. So Amar Rava, but first Rava gives us a separate law. Rava says, Betar, if that person is completely tahor. He never had this nega before. He gets these spots on the eve of Yontif. Everybody says, don't go to the Kohen. Why? Because only something bad could happen. Right now, your status quo is you're tahor. Why are you going to go to the Kohen and cause problems? Wait, you have to go to the Kohen, but you can wait till after the holiday. So go to the Kohen after the holiday. So everybody says if you're tahor, that's what you do. The Hesker Rishon, let's say during your first confinement where the Kohen is not sure whether or not whether or not it's Saras or not, everybody says, everybody says if it's during your first confinement, everybody says you go to the Kohen. Why? Rashi explains, because if the Kohen will say, look, you're tahor, then you get to get out of your confinement. Even though it's not a complete confinement, you're not able to celebrate Yontif for everybody. And if he's going to say, you know what, you're tameh, well, you're really no worse off, because anyway, you were separated from the community. You weren't in shul with everyone. You weren't davening. You weren't in the chavrusa. You weren't at the daf yomi shir. So you're not that much worse off. Ki pligi, where are they arguing about? Only in a case, says Rava, on the top of Zayin on 7b. Where are they arguing about? Only in a case of Pehesker Sheni, during the second confinement. That the law there at the end of the second week of ambiguous confinement is that the Kohen now either has to pronounce you Tahora or Tameya. And if the Kohen will say you're Tamei, then you're going to become a Mitzorah Muchat, and then you're going to have to go leave the three camps and separate from everybody. So that's where there's a concern. Mar Savar, so Rabbi Meir's other position, but Kohen Talia Milsa, Itar Amoetar, Vitame Shasik. So Rameir's other position, it all depends upon the Kohen. If he wants to, he could say you're tahor, and if he thinks you're tahor, but if you're tameh, you'll just be quiet till after Yontif. Umar Savar, but Rabbi Yossi's other position, and the Chumrah other position, Lataro or Tamoksiv, that the verse states, this is the law of the Mitzorah. Lataro or Tamo. It says that in Leviticus to tell me tahor or tameh, meaning you have to give an opinion. Once you go to him, the Kohen, he has to give an opinion, and so therefore don't go if you can't handle the answer. So now let's analyze what in light of what Rava said. Let's analyze Rabbi's statement. I'm a Rabbi near and divrei Rabbi Yossi b'muchad. He said I agree with Rabbi Yossi by a mitzorah muchad, by a sur mitzorah, divrei Rabbi Meir b'muskar, and I agree with Rabbi Meir by an uncertain mitzorah. So, meaning to say that if it's a muchad, if it's a certain mitzorah, then what do you have to lose? Go to the Kohen. If anything, he could purify you. But if it's a muskar, then you can end up being worse. But I agree with Rabbi Meir by a muskar because he could give you a lenient ruling so that you could go back home. Mar says, but wait 1 second. We have a different version of what Rabbi said, where actually he said the exact opposite. Vatanya ibcha. But we have the exact opposite version of what Rebbe said. So where he says, I agree with Rebbe Meir by a mitzorah muchat, by a certain mitzorah, that's where you go. But I agree with Rebbe Meir, but with Rebbe Yossi by a muskar, by an uncertain one, you don't go. So the Gemara says, actually it's a tanahi. It's actually a dispute as to what Rebbe said. And what's the basis of this dispute? Tanahi aliba de Rebbe. Why? Mar savar tzavta alma adif wa umar savar tzavta the isho adif wa. So one is of the position that a person prefers to be with tzavta de alma. A person prefers to be with his friends. Umar savar tzavta the isho adif wa. No, the person prefers to be with his wife, to be able to have marital relations with his wife, than to be able to hang out with his friends. How is this a dispute here? Because the mitzorah muchat, if he's a certain mitzorah, he has to leave the three camps. But even though he can't be part of the community at all, he is able to be with his wife. However, once he's declared that he's no longer a mitzorah muchat and he does the ritual process, then he still has to count 7 days, and he's allowed to re-enter into the camp, but he's not allowed to be with his wife during those 7 days. So according to the approach, it says that you can go to the Kohen when it's a mitzorah muchat, but I agree with Rabbi Meir, because he's saying that the person, even though he can't be with his wife anymore, he want to be with his friends. and so therefore it's a leniency, according to the one who says no, that Rabbi Meir says don't go there because it's not a leniency, because he'd prefer to be with his wife over Yontif than with his friends. And that's the nature of the dispute. Which does a person prefer to be with their wife or with their friends? So the Gemara says, L'meimra, they didn't ask the wife. But anyway, that's the question. L'meimra the muchat mutar b'tash mishamita. So the
wife might have preferred that he's with his friends.
could have, all sorts of things could have happened. L'meimra the muchat mutar b'tash mishamita. This tells us that the mitzvah muchat, while he's a mitzvah muchat, while he's a sur mitzvah, before he's purified from that, it's got to be outside of 3 camps, but he is actually allowed to engage in marital relations. He's allowed to be engaged in marital relations. So Gemara says, yes, that is the case. But Tanya, what's the source for it? It says in the verse, V'yashav michutz la'ohalo shabbat yamim, that after he is purified from being a mitzvah muchat, it says v'chibeis ha'miteres begadav, he should wash his clothing. The gilach es kol saro, he shaves his hair. V'rachatz b'mayim v'taher, and then he comes into the camp, is pure. V'achar yavo ha'machaneh, then afterwards he comes back to the camp. So now he's purified from being a mitzvah, but still he has to stay outside of his tent for 7 days. And then he's going to bring a korban. So we see from here, even though he's purified, he then has to stay outside his tent for 7 days, which implies that during those 7 days he can't be in his tent, i.e. with his wife. But prior to that, while he was a mitzvah, he was allowed to. So we say that he's prohibited to have relations during those 7 days. When it says his tent, that refers to Ishto, that refers to his wife. As it states, as it says at Sinai, God told Moses, tell them to go back to their tents, to be with their wives again. So the concept is found in this week's parsha, but this is a pasuk from Sefer Devarim. So Rabbi Yehuda says Shivas Yamim Yisperulo. So it says at the end of that pasuk that what Rabbi Yehuda says, it says in Ezekiel that after it becomes purified, he shall count 7 days, which implies Yemei Sfiro v'lo Yemei Chiluto. That those days, says Rabbi Yehuda, those days that he can't be with his wife are during the days of the 7 counting days, but not during the days of his mitzvah muchat. Not during the days where he's a mitzvah. While he's actually a mitzvah, he's allowed to be with his wife. That's so far we've seen the position of Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama, where they're both saying the same thing, but Rabbi Yehuda cites the additional verse. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, no, that the mitzvah also can't be with his wife during while he's a mitzvah, because he says, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, Zayin yimei sfiro kal v'chomer u'mechiluto. If he can't be with his wife during the 7 days that he's counting, where he's already pure, for sure he can't be with his wife during the days of chiluto, during the days where he's a complete mitzvah. And because it's a kal v'chomer, he's on a higher level of stringency. He's actually impure. For sure he can't be with his wife. When I was studying in front of Rebbe, and I said, that our rabbis taught us that Yosam, he said, I'll bring you a proof that a mitzvah is allowed to be with his wife, because Uziyahu was a mitzvah, and while Uziyahu was a mitzvah, that's when Yotam was conceived, and so therefore this proves that that during your days of an absolute mitzvah, you're still allowed to be with your wife. So he says, Amar afani kach amarti. Rebbe said, you know what? I said the same thing. I have the same raya, I have the same proof that during your days of mitzvah, you're allowed to be with one's wife, because we learned it out from Uziyahu. So, and that's when Yotam was conceived. So the Gemara says, well, the next point is, so the Gemara says, what's the nature of the argument between Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, who allows you to be with your spouse during the days of Chaluta, the Mitzvah Mochat, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says you can't. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Savar Gali Rachmana Bimei Sfiro, V'Kol Shkeim Bimei Chiluto. He says the Torah tells us you're not allowed to be with your wife during the 7 days, And for sure, while you're actually a Mitzorah, you can't be with your wife. And Mar Sava, whereas Rabbi Yehuda himself says, no, that's not the way it works. We can't make up prohibitions from a logical argument. The Gali, the low Gali, low Gali. Whatever the Torah tells us, that's clear what the prohibition is. What it didn't tell us is not part of the prohibition. So the Gemara says, okay, but let's look at another point here. This is another background to this whole discussion of Mitzorah, that you have the idea. I mean, they could have led with this. The Kohen Tayim also that the whole things were depend upon the Kohen, whether or not you go to the Kohen has the power to declare Yom Mitzorah. Mar says, indeed that's the case. Tanya, we learned it in a brayso. So what does the brayso say? Yom Ospo, on the day that you show the affliction to the Kohen, on that day the Kohen will tell you whether or not you have Mitzoras. Yesh Yom Shatarabo, Yesh Yom Shiatarabo. So it says the Gemara, there's some days you go, and there's some days, you push it off. This is not the day to go to the Kohen. Mikan Amru, and from here they taught, Chasan Shanoa Bonega, that if there's a Chasan who has a affliction, the Chasan sees something, it looks like Taras, we give him the Zayin Yimei Mishta. We give him the 7 days of a wedding. Meaning to say, we allow him the whole 7 days. Some say from here it's a proof that Sheva Brachos is biblical, because he doesn't just say give him the wedding, give him all 7 days to celebrate with his wife. So it overrides even a commandment from the Torah of separating for tzaras, is the idea of being with one's wife for the first 7 days after the marriage, and also a vesel tzusa, also for his house and for his clothing. Also on a yontif, nosnin lo, also on a yontif nosnin lo shivat yimei regel. So that's the position of Rabbi Yehuda. That Rabbi Yehuda says you give him the 7 days and for wedding and also for yontif. Whereas, so Rabbi Yehuda bases it on the fact that it says in the verse of the Yom Heroispo. Whereas Rabbi says, no, we're not going to base it on that verse of the Yom Herois, but we don't need to. This is by tzaras on a house, that before the Kohen comes to look at the house, whatever's going to be in the house is tamei. So first we say, the Kohen says, before I get there, take everything out. Why? Because I don't want to make it tamei. I don't want to make anything tamei. So therefore, take everything out of the house. Now, and there it's a discretionary matter. What's just to save the things it's possible, inconvenient, or loss of money. So, lo with var rishus, mitzvah. If we wait for the Kohen to come for something that's discretionary, for sure we can wait for him for a mitzvah, i.e., for the shav brachos for a wedding. So we see from here the fundamental idea that the Kohen Talyam Milsa. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, my benayo, really Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi are both saying the same thing, which is that the Kohen can wait, and he does it all depends upon the Kohen. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda says it from the verse of Yom Rosbo, and Rabbi derives it from Pino Asabayas. But they both said the same idea, that the Kohen that you have the ability to wait before declaring something saras. So the Gemara explains, Amar Bai Mashmos Darshani Kumbina. No, the only difference between them is how do you understand the psukim? You want to read the psukim the right way. Whereas Rabba says Dvar Rishus Ikabinayo. So Rabba says no, the distinction between them is a Dvar Rishus, is if it's discretionary. So if it's just cleaning out the house. So according to Rabbi, that even for a Dvar Rishus, that even for a discretionary matter, you're allowed to push off declaring him a mitzvah. Whereas according to Rabbi Yehuda, no, it's only for a mitzvah, like a Sheva Brachos or a festival. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda may hasam ol gamrina and the Why does Rabbi Yehuda not learn it out from the pasuk of Pinu Esabayis? Because he says that's a whole chiddush. That whole case is so unusual. What's the unusual feature there? The unusual law is the tzaras on a house is the eitzim v'avana ba'alma lo mitarmu v'acham lo mitarmu. In general, stones don't become tamei, or also wood that was just plain pieces of wood. It was not fashioned in the utensil, don't become tamei. And here they do. So that's why you can't learn out from a chiddush, from an unusual law, from a novel law. You can't learn out the general halacha to other areas. And so therefore we wouldn't know that that a Metzora, the Kohen has discretion from that case. Okay, I'll be happy to take any questions. If anybody has any questions.